Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Alex's Afternoon Art Show. Today we are drawing Wolverine, which is something I've not done technically speaking. The last time I drew Wolverine was the Marvel vs. Capcom 2 mural. Well, that was the last time I drew Wolverine proper. I did Weapon X drawing after that. That was, I think, around this time last year, so it's been a while. But yeah, it's been some time now since I did a Wolverine. So this is the thing. I felt like it was only right to do it eventually again because the last time I actually drew a proper Wolverine of my own volition was like one of the first episodes of the art show as a whole. So yeah, it's been a while, and that was the brown and tan costume I did. This time we're doing yellow and blue, and we're going to be talking a lot about posing. So yeah, may as well just show you what I have and get on with it. Because yeah, it's not the most complex pose in the world, but there's a few things to talk about. So yeah. So, right, here we are. This is what I have. As I say, it's not the most complex pose in the world, but there's more to talk about than there is, than there isn't. I suppose. Weird way of thinking about it, I suppose. But yeah, so I mentioned that it's been a while since I did a Wolverine. It's a half and half true on that one because, technically speaking, the last time I did a Wolverine, at the time of recording this, was for the X-Men Origins Wolverine videos. And it was the same sort of thing that happened with that happened with Ultimate Spider-Man, where I drew Spider-Man and Venom a lot. So it was a long time after that before I did another Spider-Man, and even longer before I did another Venom. And I felt like I had to make them very different than the ones I drew in those. So here I'm kind of doing sort of the same thing, of where this is a bit more of a comic-y Wolverine than what was in those videos. And again, it's been a while. So right, let's start going over things. So one of the big ones which I wanted is that he is pretty yoked. I wanted him to seem small and bulky. I think he comes across as small because his limbs aren't super long, nor is his torso. His torso is kind of short and stubby, and kind of that's sort of his general body type is what I've kind of gone for here. Is a bit stubby. I tried to avoid making the claws too long, so I did measure them. I don't think they're too long. I will have to make some adjustments because they're a little hairy, the edges of them. And aside from all the body hair you've got, the rest of the lines shouldn't be too hairy. This isn't technically any one design in particular, because there's a few elements here, like you can see a lot of the lines working through the design, where I've added some sort of bits of design into the sort of flat yellow pieces. And even with the gloves, there's a little bit of a sort of lines working through them. I'm not sure if I'll actually keep a lot of those because it feels a little much in places to have all that stuff going on. So this line here that comes down, these two lines, is sort of there to evoke the astonishing design, but this isn't the astonishing design. This is just going to be a flat yellow for the upper body for the most part, and the like pointed the like cut designs on there will be black. So it's closer to the sort of 90s design than anything else. And yeah, the shoulder pads, I wanted to make them big and bulky, and sort of, again, the way that his arm is up, it sort of like comes up like this, it sort of pokes up. And I feel like there's a sort of a sweet spot to be found with the size of Wolverine's mask, and I think I've hit it here, of where it's really big, but not enormous, and not too small, because I feel like whenever it's too small, it looks a little, it just doesn't really evoke the same feeling. Because you always, I mean, I mention this a lot, but one of the sort of influences that I have a lot of the way that I draw these characters comes from a lot of older Capcom art, specifically a lot of Bendis drawings for Marvel vs. Capcom series. And so with Wolverine in particular, Bendis would always draw Wolverine with a huge mask, and I always quite liked that because I found a lot of artists don't really go for that, or if they do, they go for something like enormously big. But a lot of people tend to go for a more contemporary, realistic thing, which generally means they go for a smaller size, which I'm not as keen on. I prefer it to be huge. Now the pose. I should actually cover that, given that what we're supposed to be talking about is posing. So yeah, I wanted to get something. Initially, I thought of something. I was originally going to have it be like doing a pose where he's kind of hunched in. He has his hands up like this, something like that. Like kind of stood and squatting, something like that. A bit more kind of like hunched in, a bit more kind of looking towards the camera. But I felt like I wanted something a bit more dynamic, so I decided to have this sort of like leaping to the side thing going on here, where there's the one leg up and then there's the one leg straight down. And then again, this is something which I mentioned before. I've mentioned this a few times, but it's more interesting to have the limbs doing a bunch of different things than it is to have them all doing the same thing. Now, granted, it is wise to not go too crazy with that. For example, it would be a bit strange if he had this one arm up like this, but then his other arm was like scratching the back of his head or something like that. It should sort of fit the pose that you're going for at the end of the day. So the sort of arm being up and then the other one being back is a sort of it's not a classic pose, but it's sort of something that kind of evokes the character of where a lot of the time you'll have the kind of claws up in front, of where they'll kind of cover the face in such a way, but I wanted to still have the face on show, so I moved the arm over to the side. And then a lot of the time his arms are out in a lot of poses, so I decided to have the one arm out while the other one's up. And then obviously if you're doing a jumping pose, a lot of the time you'll just have one leg facing the camera where it's up and then one leg down. This leg was originally going to be back, and this pose was going to be more front-facing, hence why the arm was originally going to be in the front, but I decided to just sort of tilt things around like that. And so it's more interesting to just keep it like that. That's kind of most of the stuff that I wanted to cover with the pose. Yeah, I sort of, again, I wanted to keep a lot of these things. As I say, having things be too symmetrical can be a little boring, but there's a certain point where it can get a little crazy if you go a little too overboard with some of the asymmetry stuff. Again, as I just said, you want to sort of keep things in the realm of logic with the poses. You don't want to go too crazy with them. You want it to seem a little bit more. You want to keep it interesting visually, but you don't want to go in such a way of where the pose is kind of just weird. And again, this is a sort of a leaping pose, so again, there's a certain element of where he's kind of leaping forward and out like that. So obviously there's those elements which are, I think, clear enough from what I've been saying. There's a few details which I wanted to cover quickly, such as his face. I gave him a bit of a sort of a bit of a nastier face because he is doing a bit of a big yell. So yeah, I made all these sort of extra details on his forehead and around his eyes and things like that. I think it works. We'll see. I might tone it down as I'm doing these details now in a minute, because I think some of it might be a little much, but we'll see. Because yeah, obviously he's doing like a big intense kind of expression, so his nose is kind of tucking up, and so you're getting these lines underneath his eyes. And the crow's feet and stuff at the sides. So, and again, I think Wolverine should look a certain amount of gruff at the end of the day. Can't have his face looking too clean because it just doesn't look right at that point. But yeah, I'll have to cover some more of those details after I've done this section. So yeah, I will do these details and I'll be back with the colors, but I'll probably have to go over a few more things at that point anyways. So yeah, I'll move on. Okay, that is our details done. That took a little while because, again, this is a more detailed drawing because he's a bit more zoomed in than I've been doing recently. I mean, he does basically fill the entire frame. The claws touch near enough the top of the frame, and the bottom of his foot touches near the bottom of the frame, so he covers a lot of space. But there's a few things I want to cover here. One of the things which I didn't really go over much is his mouth, is his sort of expression. I wanted to sort of give him a bit of a sort of crazy face. One of the things that I thought of originally that I didn't end up implementing was I was going to give him the triangle eyes, but oftentimes, anytime in the past that I've drawn Wolverine, I normally just give him normal human eyes, but sometimes I've considered doing the sort of triangle eyes, and I normally would only really do that on characters who have masks kind of like this, of where their kind of eyes are typically covered. Or they have white eyes or some sort of weird kind of eyes in that sense. That's what I've been doing with Batman recently, is anytime I draw Batman I always give him triangle eyes. Granted, I haven't drawn Batman in a while, but that's besides the point. But I decided to go with just normal human eyes and just keep them white, but instead just sort of make them more angular eyes. Because that's sort of just how his eyes are here. I made them much more angular, like this one in particular. It's a little wedged in, it's a little far in, but that's mostly just because this part of the mask kind of has to poke out like that to a degree. But yeah, so his shoulder pads look a lot bigger now, now that you can't see underneath them. Another thing is that once, you know, the hair is black, it becomes a lot darker. So his arms are very, very hairy, insanely so. So a lot of people, whenever they draw the kind of hair on Wolverine's arms, they tend to make it sort of, a lot of people will do hair, let me just demonstrate, it's easier if a lot of people will do hair like this. They'll sort of do it in little notches and then they'll layer it up like that. But the way I've done it, let me rub that out just so that that's clear. Just use a bigger brush for the erasing, just that I'm not leaving any marks. The way I do it is I tend to do it like this, where it's a lot bigger. And like you can even see, that's how I did it here. Just because it's cleaner, in a way. Well, it just sort of makes the hair look longer. It makes it look like longer, like almost animal hair. And that's what sort of makes more sense for Wolverine, to me at least, is to make it look a bit more like animal hair. And I sort of missed the thing that I was going to say about his mouth. A lot of the time, whenever people draw Wolverine's sort of mouth area, they won't include the sort of remnants of the mutton chops, because in a lot of stuff it is obscured. The mutton chops are kind of obscured, but realistically speaking, you should be seeing a little bit of it. I mean, that's even in the movie, you do sort of see a little bit of that whenever he's got the mask. So that's the thing. It should probably still be visible. So I kept a little bit of it. And the hair on his chin is slightly darker than the hair of the mustache, because he doesn't have a mustache. He doesn't have anything at the chin either. But it should probably be darker because most people grow darker hair at the bottom of their chin versus their mustache. Typically, that's how it works. Most people grow a thicker hair on the chin than the mustache area. So another thing is that I pointed his teeth. That's the thing which a lot of the time I don't do with Wolverine. It's a artist by artist thing. Some artists like it, some artists don't. I oftentimes don't do that, but I decided to give it a try, and I gave Wolverine just generally more jaggedy looking teeth here in this expression. And I think it works. Like even like his molars are a bit kind of misshapen looking, a bit more animalistic, and his teeth are kind of like weirdly slanted, and some of them are like poking, like this cane on here kind of pokes more backwards than it does forwards, when they should kind of come forward a little bit. But yeah, like they're a little bit misshapen, a little bit weird, his teeth. But yeah, is there anything else I really wanted to cover about the detailing before I just move on? Yeah, I was careful about the lines, because obviously I have stuff here which obviously these lines are there to evoke the astonishing design. Well, this isn't the astonishing design, it's just there to evoke it, because I think it's an interesting idea to just sort of throw it in there. I reshaped the cuts on his side, because originally they went up onto his pec, which isn't how it normally is, so I just brought these ones down, because these ones are fine, it was just these ones that are the problem, so I just brought them down a little bit. I just reshaped the pattern a little bit. Again, I mentioned this a few times now recently, but it's just something about the sort of fine dark edge that I quite enjoy around a character. So yeah, that's just something which I think is fun. Yeah, those details did take a while, but the reason for that is because, like as I mentioned, whenever you have a pose which has the limbs all kind of doing different things, it's more interesting to draw, it's more interesting to look at, but it is certainly more difficult to draw, and it takes a lot more time. Realistically speaking, I mean, whenever you have all the limbs doing similar things, like if you have both arms out in the same position, it's not going to necessarily be quicker. But what it does mean is you don't have to think quite as much about it the second time you're doing it. You're just sort of going through the motions, hence why it's a little less interesting to draw. Because you're doing the same thing again. But yeah. Anyways, it's time to move on to the colors. So, colors shouldn't take too long. Wolverine doesn't have much going on with his colors. They're fairly simple. I will have to do a little bit of hair because of this, because there's that little bit of mutton chop showing there. What do I have to do here? To do skin, I have to do hair, I have to do eyes, I have to do his tongue, I have to do the red, I have to do the black, I have to do the yellow, and I have to do the blue. So that's 8 colors. So, oh, and I also have to do silver, so that's 9. Yeah, okay, so I've got a few of them. I have an idea for my background. It's mostly just going to be flat yellow on the background, but I want to have 3 big cuts in it, and I think those cuts will be blue. I think that's what I'll do with those. Coming at an angle, something like that, just that it looks a bit more interesting. In the background, yeah, 3 big stripes moving through the background. Something like that. I think that'll look interesting. I think it's a fun idea, but we'll see how that looks when we get to it. I think I'll probably do the background during this section anyway, just because it's just all flat colors. That shouldn't be much of a problem. But yeah, I will move on. I'll do these colors, and then I'll be back to talk about the painted shading. So yeah. Okay, that's our colors. I went a little overboard, I think, with the background, but it's fine. The strikes definitely break up the colors a little bit more, because otherwise those yellows aren't really different enough. I feel like in order for them to kind of separate otherwise, I feel like the yellow kind of would blend a little too much into the background. Even though the background yellow is more of a neutral yellow, whereas the yellow on the character here is a little bit warmer. It's a bit of a warmer yellow. About that I mean it skews slightly more towards orange. And then the background, so the blues that I used in the character are all very vivid blues. They're unprintable blues. Let me just demonstrate that. This is CMYK. I think even the background is an unprintable blue. Yeah, the background is as well. The background gets much in dollar. So yeah, this is what it would look like in print, a little dollar. The yellow remains pretty much the same, a little bit different, but not dramatically different. Yeah, not importantly different. But yeah, So, yeah, the strikes in the background are a little messy. Again, I used a brush which was 100 in size, so I mean, I still have the brush set up, yeah. So that would yeah, obviously create much thicker, much messier, well, not even messier, just sort of weird looking lines. Again, they don't all necessarily blend perfectly. This one obviously blends a little nicer, this one's a little bit more accurate, this one's a bit messier. But really, the strikes don't matter all that much. They're just there to just give us something a little bit, just have something going on in the background, because otherwise it'd be a bit basic. And particularly with yellow just as a flat yellow for the background doesn't normally do much, in my opinion. Not normally too into it. But yeah, the sort of blue breaks up the background, and it is a different enough blue from the blue of the character that it's fine. So yeah, now we got our painted shading, which I'm probably going to go a bit subtler with this. I've got a color palette picked. It's going to be a bit of a sunsetty tone, but one which has a dark blue at the end of it, and then at the other side a bit a bright yellow. So just something that sort of includes his colors and it doesn't lose any of them in particular. That it'll probably give certain things a slight orangey or purple hue in some instances. So we'll see. I'll be applying some glints to the claws. That's something which I think would be fun, is to just have a little bit of kind of, yeah, like sheen coming off of the claws. There's some sparkles. I think that'll look alright. In theory it should be fine, but that's something I don't think we're going to need to worry about until the detailed shading or any of that stuff. Yeah, I don't think there's an enormous amount to cover here before I just carry on. The light is going to be over here, the shadows over here. So yeah, that's why I was thinking of adding the sort of glints to the claws, just to sort of give it a bit more life. But yeah, anyways, I think I will just carry on. I'll do these paints and then I'll be back to talk about the detailed shading and all that other stuff. So yeah. Alright, that is our painted shading done. That didn't take very long. There's a few things which I didn't bother doing any painted shading on, such as the claws, because they just don't cover up enough surface area where I felt it was necessary. So I'll be doing all that in this section. As I mentioned before, I'll be doing the little sort of glints and stuff like that on the claws around here. And I'll be doing a few little just sort of effects like that. See what we can manage with that stuff. I don't want to go too crazy with it. I already have my color palette and everything selected. So this shouldn't really take too long, in theory. It should be pretty quick. So yeah, in theory, I should be able to get this done pretty fast. I say that as we're 3.5 hours in to the recording, so you know, hopefully it shouldn't take too much longer. Is there anything I really need to cover? I don't think so. I don't think there's anything I really need to cover. Just that they'll be doing those little bits of effects and stuff like that, so there'll be a few tiny little things to add in the end here. But largely, yeah, the color palette isn't really going to change once the gradient map goes on. I don't think. It should maybe just warm up a little bit, I think, is the only thing that will happen. The blues will probably get a little washed out, if anything, but not too crazy. Again, like, I mean, the paint kind of washed out the blues a little bit already, because of the fact that I used yellow as the lighter part of that. The blue never really takes to that all that well, so it just sort of looks a little weird. But in theory, that should sort of even out once all the sort of gradient maps and everything go on. So we'll see. Anyways, I'll do these the detailed shading, the light line, and the first gradient map, and I'll be back to do all that last stuff and then wrap up. So yeah. Anyways. Okay, that is our detailed shading, our light line, and our first gradient map done. So, our gradient map, obviously, as I mentioned, is sort of a clean, kind of a bluey color. This is the sort of color we got going on here, a bluey black color, all the way up through a purple, and to a kind of a reddy orange, then an orange itself, and then a yellow. So it's a fairly warm color palette, as I mentioned before. But ultimately, we didn't lose our blue. Now, part of that is because I did lower the opacity quite low on this gradient map. It's 60%. The last few I've been doing have been 70 to 80. A lot of the time recently, so it's a little, again, this is what I used to normally have it at, but recently I've been bringing it up quite a bit to get some more vivid color palettes. But here I wanted to bring it down because I don't want to lose those blues too much. But yeah, that was just all I wanted to mention there. So let's just keep going and get through the rest of these gradient maps. Let's throw a luminosity in here, because that will make this a bit yellower, definitely. Above certainly washes it out a little bit. Let's turn it down to about 20% and see how that looks above and below. It's more vivid below, keep it below. Alright, make a duplicate of that, put that above, then make this a color burn, and set that down to 5%. Yeah, this is a bit more of an sort of a color palette that we would use in a few of the older sort of ones. I say older, the last sort of like 10. I've largely been kind of sticking to fairly vivid color palettes, and even here this is a pretty vivid color palette. So it's not that different. It's just lower opacities to the point at which, yeah, it's a bit less kind of. Well, I don't think it's any less visually striking, but it's certainly less sort of aggressive. I am just realizing I forgot to do those glints, so I'll do that here now in a second. That'll only take 5 seconds, so I may as well just do that as I'm set here. I don't know why I did that. I should have left it on the grab. So right, let's turn that down. Don't want the texture to be too intense because it'll affect the background pretty intensely, so let's say 20%. It's visible on the background and it's visible on the character, but it's not super visible on the background, which is what we want. We don't want it to be too crazy on the background because it will sort of... The background is supposed to be fairly clean, is kind of what I'm going for here in terms of the visual. So right, let me just do these glints. Maybe just change the name of that to Sparkles. Now we're going to grab gradient tool. Gonna want this one. Gonna want it to be this type. Switch it to white. Zoom in. And then do one of these. Maybe not that intense. Maybe something like that. Nope. Maybe a bit more. Nope. A bit more like this. Sort of layer it up a little bit so that it's a bit more. Maybe layer it down a little bit. I think that looks alright. Maybe even hard light. No, it doesn't make any difference. Do we want ones down here? I think we do want ones down there actually. I think that looks alright like that. Those ones will look a little better actually because they're more equidistant. These ones are a little muddy. I think it's just because it's already bright here. Yeah, no, those actually, yeah, that looks alright. That works. I'm happy with that. Again, it's not a terribly difficult effect to do. So it's just the type of thing which you can just throw on whenever you need it. But yeah, that is that. Yeah, I like the sort of how those little effects, stuff like that work. I was considering having maybe some stuff like Spark Off because to maybe give it the sort of the effect of Wolverine sort of sparking out the claws, but I don't really much care to add that. It's the type of thing which I think will just sort of I think it'll just sort of confuse the visual that we've got going on here as it stands. I think it looks better like this. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I have anything more to add to this. This was a fun one. Again, like I say, it's It's the type of thing where I always end up holding off for ages before I draw a character that I've been drawing a lot in thumbnails. So with Wolverine, I waited quite a while before I did another Wolverine one, because again of those because of those X-Men Origins Wolverine thumbnails, I ended up having to draw a lot of Wolverine. So yeah, at least it's a very different looking Wolverine than the ones I had to draw there. But yeah, I mean, that was even what I did with Spider-Man and Venom. I ended up doing two ones which were very different to the ones that I've been doing before. So, you know, it came out well, I think. At least we didn't lose those blues. They're a little purplier than they were before, but that's obviously going to happen whenever you have a very purpley gradient map. A sunset gradient map. A sunset color palette, again. Doesn't really matter all that much. I don't think our next one's going to be sunsetty. No, chances are low, I would say. Our next one will be different. Anyways, so yeah, I don't think there's anything else I need to add to this. I'm pretty happy with it. I'm happy to leave it there. So I suppose I'll just do my outro and that'll be that. So yeah, if you liked the video, do whatever it is that you'd normally do, whether that be liking or not. I'd of course prefer if you liked it, but I can't make you do that, so all I can do is politely suggest it, which I believe I have done. It's the same deal if you want to subscribe. Go for it. I'm not going to stop you. If anything, I'll encourage it. Lightly, of course, because I don't want to be too odd about that sort of thing. So yeah, you know where the subscribe button is. You presumably seen a YouTube video before, but you know, if you, for whatever reason, need to be told, it's below the video, as it would always be. And yeah, if you have a suggestion for what you'd like to see me draw in the future, you could leave a comment, politely worded. I would prefer that. If you're going to do it that way, or just don't do it at all. If you're not going to be polite about it, just don't do it. I'd rather that at the end of the day. And if you choose to watch the next video, I will see you next time. I forgot what I was saying there for a second. But yeah, with all that said, that is us. So I will say goodbye and then I will leave you. So, bye-bye.